Hey, don't go anywhere. We're fixing to build this cool seat from scratch. In the morning, I was building this seat while I was sleeping, so couldn't sleep, so I might as well get up and do this. What we have here is a seat from a Ducati motorcycle. It belongs to my brother-in-law, so I figured I'd knock this thing out for him. So what we need to do, he is making a cafe racer out of it, and we want to streamline this seat. So I need to cut a big chunk out of the bottom of it, reshape the foam a little bit. Some of the perimeters that we have to work around are the stanchions that where it sits on the frame. I don't want those to show when the seat's done. So we want to make sure we stay below those, but yet get a good chunk out of this seat to where it's going to look cool. Just like a hot rod, these motorcycles can be done in all kinds of different ways. So let's see if we can't fix this thing up for him. So before we took it off of the motorcycle frame, we made a couple of marks on it where it needs to at least somewhat sit. Now this piece right here that we're cutting out, we'll add back in with a decorative piece of aluminum, you know, maybe some a little aluminum panel with some holes or something cut in it to make it look cool. So we can make this area up, but what we're really trying to achieve is a nice looking streamlined seat where it doesn't look like a saddle sitting on a horse. All right, so let's get some tape and make a tape line and see if we can't make this thing flow. That looks good right there. Something doesn't look right about it. And it really looks like I'm really close, because this tape I'm going off of the bottom, and the tape that I put on the inside I'm actually going off of the top, and those lines look like they're almost meeting up, and that was pretty accidental. So I'm thinking that somewhere along that line right there is where we're going to need to be. We'll go ahead and mark this on the foam. I'm thinking that's where we need to start. Let's go cut this out. So at this point, I've tried every saw that I've got, wood bandsaw, metal bandsaw, and I resulted to a sheetrock knife or a sheetrock saw or a keyhole saw. That seems to have worked the best for me to take it slow and make sure that I stayed in the same direction that I needed to go and not cut sideways. All right, I want to get this lined up the best I can so we can trim the second side like we did the first side. I was a little off on my tape from where we measured, and that's why I'm glad that we're going to do it off of this cut piece. Let's get this side cut. All right, so let me clean this up a little bit with a grinder and finish shaping this foam, because this came out square, and what I've been doing is rounding it over, and we'll make a pattern off of that. All right, just to get an idea of what we cut off, This is the section of the seat I cut off, minus a little bit of sanding and grinding in there. And this right here came out really tall, way out here, and then started tapering off. And then the same on the other side as well. So we made a drastic change in the way the seat looks with the side profile. And remember, this section right here, plus a void that's already in the bike, is going to get replaced by a very cool Cafe Racer style panel that goes in there. I got a feeling the toughest part of this whole thing is going to get this foam to look the same on both sides. This is a second side here, so we've got to make sure that it looks just like the first side so we can make our upholstery patterns and everything's the same. It's pretty satisfying sanding the old foam, making it into its new shape. Little Roloc with a 60 grit grinder disc. Here's the new profile for the seat. Much, much different than the way it was. Took out a lot of foam just to get that taper back. So now we need to lay out a design. I'm not much on diamonds or anything like that, but we'll make it look more traditional. Maybe add some red somewhere, maybe some extra panels. Just got to play with it and see. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking some clear vinyl and I'm going to use this to make a pattern for my new seat. All right, so I hit the old plastic with the heat gun, got it smooth. Now I'm going around the edges of the seat with my Sharpie, and I am making something that I can see through, some marks. I'm using those marks, I'm laying down my plastic, I'm cutting out my patterns to those marks, and I'm doing that on the top and the sides. Once I get everything cut out, I'll pin it all up, duplicate the right side to the left side so I'll know that we've got a good pattern that matches, and then we'll compare that to the seat, and then we should be good to go to transfer these to the upholstery that we're going to use, and we'll start sewing some stuff up and hopefully make this thing look better than new. So the colors I've chosen to go with on the seat, 95% black, and I've got a roll of black here that's left over from a job. And then just to make the seat look thinner, it's got the gas tank on the motorcycle is red. I'm going to do red right here that matches the gas tank. And that's going to make the seat look thinner across here and a little bit more like a Cafe Racer type seat, because a Cafe Racer seat is actually a lot smaller and a lot thinner than this one. But this is a daily driven or daily ridden motorcycle. So we don't want to make it uncomfortable. So let me get some of this cut off of these, what I'm going to use, and get rid of the rolls back under the table. And then we'll start cutting the colors out to match the patterns that we made. All right, so here I'm stretching out the material that we're going to be using. I'm going to take the patterns, the clear patterns that we made for the seat. We verified that they fit. I'm going to take them and lay them out and rough cut my material out, flipping the patterns over that I duplicated from the right side to the left side, and going ahead and adding a little bit of sew allowance. So I get questioned all the time whether or not this is a upholstery channel, and it is not. I'm just a guy that does or tries to do everything himself. So what I've done, I've got some 1/4-inch scrim or sew foam. This will be the bottom side of the seat. We may not use that on the sides because I don't want to get it too bulky. We may use some real thin stuff that I've got. So what we're going to do now is, I don't want to do this top in multiple pieces like I would if it was a car, because this is you're going to be pushing back and forth, and I'm afraid it'll break it up. Plus, it's not really necessary. What I want to do is put the pattern down on my material and the sew foam, and then I'm going to sew these pleats in, and it's going to raise it up just a little bit. It's going to be rippled, and that'll give it the design that we want without having to go through all the trouble of doing it individually. So let me get this cut out a little bit closer, and then we'll start putting the design down. All right, so what I'm doing here is just giving it a rough 1/2 inch sew allowance. We'll come back and trim this up to a 1/4 inch. The only reason I'm doing it rough right now is because we may lose a little bit of material when we sew the pleats, because it's rolling up and down. We're not going to lose it on the sides like we would end to end. But whatever comes out, what we sew in this pleat right here, all the pleats, this is the actual pattern or the actual size that we'll need. We'll need sew allowance on each side, about a 1/4 inch, to sew the next panel to it. Doing so, I know that they're all straight now and not eyeball. And what I'm doing is the back line of every pleat, the first sew line, and then I'll come back and do a 1/4 inch away from this. All right, so to do the next series of lines, I want to show you this pen. It's called a space pen. It's injected with pressure when they do it, so it writes. Then they say it writes in space. It writes just about everywhere you want it to write. There is no limitations. There's none of that shaking to get the ink to come down. It's pressurized in there. And the good thing is, when you're done drawing on your upholstery, it'll wipe right off. So we want to start this off, and we're going to start doing our little 1/4. The reason I'm doing it with this pen is because it's a lot sharper of a dot versus the grease pencil. All right, really quick to bring you up to speed. We had our pattern that's exactly the size that it needs to be finished. We laid our pattern out. We roughly drew a line around it, roughly about a 1/2 inch from the edge of the pattern. Now we're going to come back and clean that up to a 1/4 inch after we get the pleats sewed. But after that, I cut out a piece of sew foam, put that on the back side. I roughly cut it out. Then I came back with a stapler and I stapled the edges way out from our original pattern. Now I'm going to go and sew a line around the roughed out area that'll lock this in place with the foam. Then I'll sew my pleats. Then we'll come back, put the pattern back on, mark our 1/4 inch sew lines, and cut that out. Then we're ready to actually sew this panel to another panel. So let's get that done. All right, just take it super slow, guys. Your sewing machine can get away from you when you're running these tight stitches next to each other to resemble the French seam. Now, if you have to, if your sewing machine will not go down to a super slow crawl like this, you might want to do it by hand. Just grab the wheel and do it in a clockwise motion. And then when you start to end your stitch, there's no reason you can't do that as well, even if you are doing it by machine, by the foot. I always go ahead and outside of where I know my sew allowance is going to be, you saw me do a reverse stitch, and I'm just locking that stitch in. Now I'm not cutting my thread right here. I'm moving it on over to the next line, and that keeps the tension on the thread, so you don't have to start over each time. Now, if you needed to start over and you wanted to cut that, that's why I have all these little scraps, and I just run that through, and that keeps my tension. For all you guys out there that have been doing this for a long time, I'm sure I'm going to get some comments about some of this stuff. But I'm self-taught, and all I'm doing is trying to use my simple approach to maybe encourage somebody else to get out there and do their own stuff. I'm sure there's techniques I'm leaving out, but that leaves you guys room to be self-taught as well. Let's get on with this. All right, I'm setting up to run the next to last line here on the seat bottom, and then we'll lay this thing out and see what it looks like. Like I said, this is a quickie, a budget build. It's going to look really nice, and it's going to really wear pretty good because it's all still one piece instead of made up in panels. When you make something up in panels and you sit on it like a motorcycle and you ride the motorcycle hard and you're scooting back and forth and all that thread and all that material will stretch on you and just, you know, not last as long. Not that it's going to fall apart or anything like that, but all right, so there we go. We've got our pleats sewed in here. This is the original pattern. This is how big the seat has to be on top. So you can see the white. All we did on the white sewing line is some thread that I already had in the machine. That is just to hold the foam and the material together. We could have put some tack glue on it or something like that. All right, so now what we need to do is make sure we have a center line, which is on the pattern. We want to do a center line on this pattern here on the seat. Line up the pattern, and then we can go ahead and make a little bit of reference points around the edges. And we want to get about a 1/2 inch sew allowance, because I'm going to fold the seam back down after I sew it and then put a top stitch on it. All right, so we've established the center line of our new seat. I made some marks on that, and I'm trying to make most of my marks off of what the seat's actually going to be, so it'll be less cleanup. All right, now I can take my seam gauge. I'm going to double check and make sure that I've got a 1/2 inch, and it is set up for 1/2 inch. Go ahead and run this around. All right, I got my sew allowance marked off, and I want to make this a nice smooth cut. You don't have to follow the lines as much as just get close and make it a nice smooth cut, because when you sew the edges together, you don't want it to be jagged looking or run in the wrong direction. So now what we're doing here is a 1/2 inch bigger than the actual pattern. All right, now that's done. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew around the edge of this and hopefully lock in these stitches so they won't come out. I know I've got a 1/2 inch to work with, so I'm going to set up my guide on about a 1/4 inch. Our first look at it, I'll reach around and make sure that it's falling close to where we want it to when the seat is sewed up. All right, I don't know if you can see because of the glare on it, but this is the one panel that we made, and we want to give it a little bit of detail. So I cut the tail off of it that we had done in black. We made that to where it said black, but it's a separate piece. All right, so now we'll make another panel with this, but I needed to give this one the sew allowance so that we can hook them back together. It may be a little confusing, but it's just going to give it that extra element of detail that it's multiple pieces instead of just one piece. All right, I don't know if we'll have enough to go right here, and we don't. So we'll do the small one right there. All right, here's the side panel. We cut it in two pieces, and I went ahead and sewed one of them together. This is what we're looking for right here. The two pieces sewed together, folded back, and then top stitched the seam. Now we should have our 1/2 inch sew allowance all the way around here. So don't worry about the ragged edges. That'll all be tucked in. So let's clean this up a little bit and get it ready to sew onto the other panel. All right, so I cleaned that up. Let's lay our panels back on top with our 1/2 inch sew allowance and make sure that everything that we just got through sewing together will be hidden. There's that panel. It's getting really close right there. I may have gotten off just a little bit. All right, all we can do is try. It's really, really close tolerance on all this stuff to make it work. But all right, so I'm finishing up these last few panels on this motorcycle seat. Very tedious, tight area back here in the back. One slip of the pedal, and I'm gonna get a speeding ticket that I can't get out of. And you see right here, I was going to put a red panel right there. And after looking at a picture of the motorcycle, the red did not match the material that I had. And I didn't want to chance it. The red thread pops enough. All right, first look. I'm gonna take this thing inside where it's super warm, and tomorrow we'll be able to staple this down and it will become a seat again. If you comment on a video, if you're a subscriber, you might get a Spanky's t-shirt in the mail. So, see you guys in the morning. All right, just to keep the mess down, I am putting the glue on this cover, and I'm just using a little bit. I'm just using enough to where when I pull it tight to staple underneath, that it's not moving around on the top side, if that makes any sense. I'm not trying to use this glue to hold it in place. I'm putting it on with a brush where you normally see me spray. This helps me make sure that it stays just where I want it and not everywhere else, which is mainly this seam right here. I'm putting a light tack coat on the other part, but I'm only doing half of the seat at a time. I'll let this glue almost completely dry, and then when it makes contact, it sticks with the other side, which I've already put down. All right, stretch it out. Not to stretch it to where you're pulling your stitches or anything out, but just stretch it out. Tap it just a little bit and let it get in place. Keep your seams lined up that you made to go around the edges. You're not doing the same thing I'm doing, but I'm talking like you are. Just double checking and making sure that I have enough to pull around and pull over. And now let's do this, the back side. All right, so I'm going to continue to stretch the seat around and make sure all of my seams are lined up like we planned for them to be. Make sure I have enough to tuck underneath the bottom and get ready to pop some staples in it. So at this point, it's pretty much downhill. Let's see what it looks like. All right, so I've got it all glued up, tacked down, and from this point, all I have to do is trim and tuck and staple everything back like it was from the factory. And then I got to hit it with a steamer and get rid of a few of the wrinkles. But guys, for about $20 worth of material and thread, we took a big bulky seat from a Ducati, whatever that is, and cut it down and made a slick little cafe racer type seat out of it. Not a cafe racer where it's got a really small seat, but we just made it look very more modern and very small and made the bike look faster. Well, here we go. We finished the cover. Now, this is for a Ducati motorcycle. You know, I'm a hot rod channel, but at the same time, I'm giving you tips and tricks on how to do stuff at home. So we took a Ducati motorcycle seat, we cut it down, made it thinner, shaped the foam, made our patterns, made our upholstery patterns, sewed it up, and installed it on the seat. So I think my brother-in-law is going to be pretty happy with this one, as long as he stays safe, stays on the two wheels. But as always, please comment. If you comment and you're a subscriber, you have a chance to win a t-shirt given away weekly. So comment on all the videos, keep watching, but if you're tired of watching, then get out in the garage and go build something. But don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much.